In the Difa region of northeastern Niger, bordering Lake Chad, Boko Haram has displaced over 250,000 people since 2015. Children make up 60% of those refugees. Most of them walk at night, because the men with guns own the daylight. I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I am not a pastor. I am not a theologian. I am not a man who grew up reading about miracles in a comfortable pew. I am a man who was running for my life, barefoot, in the dark, carrying a 5-year-old girl on my back who was not mine by blood but had become mine by survival when the impossible happened. And I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to describe is going to sound like a fairy tale. It is going to sound like something you'd see in a children's Bible, the kind with the soft watercolor illustrations and the gentle lion with the kind eyes, except this was not soft, and this was not gentle, and those eyes, I will never forget them for the rest of my life. There were 11 of us, 11 children. The oldest was maybe 12. The youngest was 18 months, a baby girl wrapped in a piece of torn taube fabric pressed against my chest because her mother had been taken 3 days earlier at a checkpoint outside of Monguno. I didn't know where we were going. I only knew what we were running from. The smell of it still lives in the back of my throat. Burning thatch, burning rubber, burning everything. The village of Karawa, reduced to orange ash behind us, while Commander Yusuf's fighters shouted into the dark, their AK-47s cracking like the earth itself was being split open. We ran until the sounds faded, until all I could hear was the wind and the whimpering of the smallest children and my own heartbeat. Loud, desperate, animal. We stopped in a shallow ravine maybe 4 kilometers from the village. I set the children down. I looked at 11 terrified faces looking up at me, 11 pairs of eyes asking the same question. Are we going to die tonight? And I didn't have an answer. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was wind, but wind doesn't giggle, wind doesn't cackle. The sound came from the north, then the east, then, God help us, the south, circling, getting closer. Hyenas. I counted the calls, 4, 5, maybe 7 animals. They had smelled us, the blood on my feet from the rocks, the fierce sweat of 11 children who hadn't eaten in 2 days, and they were tightening the circle. I pulled the children together, arms wide, useless. What was I going to do? I had nothing, no fire, no weapon, no way out. One of the older boys, Musa, 12 years old, the kind of boy who had already seen more death than most soldiers, looked at me and whispered in Hausa, Sai Yesu. Only Jesus. I had heard that name my entire life. In the mouths of the Coptic families my mother sold bread to. On the torn pages blowing through the camp like trash. From the lips of Sister Agnes, the missionary teacher, the night before they took her. The night she pressed my hand and said, when every door closes, call on him, he answers. I looked at Musa. I looked at those 11 children. I looked up at a sky so thick with stars it seemed impossible that a God who made all of that could not see us down here, small and terrified and cornered, and I did something I had never done before in my 23 years of life. I called on Jesus. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't expect what happened. What happened is impossible, and I have witnesses. Let me tell you about Commander Yusuf Maiduguri, not because he deserves to be remembered, but because you need to understand what kind of darkness was hunting us that night in the ravine. What kind of evil forces a man to run into a hyena-filled desert carrying someone else's baby and call it the safer option. Commander Yusuf was not a monster in the way movies make monsters. He didn't snarl, he didn't foam at the mouth, he was quiet. That was the terrifying part. He was a small man, maybe 40 years old, thin, with a neat beard trimmed close to his jaw and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a schoolteacher than a warlord. He wore clean clothes. He spoke softly, and he smiled, always smiled, when he gave the order to kill. I first saw him 3 weeks before the night in the ravine. I was in Kirawa, a small Christian village in the Diffa corridor, maybe 300 people, mostly farmers and their families. I had come there 6 months earlier after fleeing my own village further east, where Al-Shabaab-aligned fighters had burned the church and killed the pastor during Sunday service. Karawa had a small underground congregation, maybe 40 believers, meeting in a mud brick house behind the millet fields at night, singing so quietly you could barely hear them from 10 meters away. I had found them the way desperate people always find each other, by accident, by hunger, by the grace of something I didn't yet have a name for. We thought we were hidden. We were not hidden. Someone had talked. Someone always talks, not always from cruelty, sometimes from terror, sometimes because Commander Yusuf's men had taken their child and were offering to return her alive in exchange for one small piece of information. I don't blame that person. I have never blamed that person. Fear does things to people that no one can judge from the outside. The first sign was the motorcycles. I heard them before I saw them. That high, whining engine sound that every person in the Sahel has learned to fear the way city people fear sirens. 3 motorcycles, then 5, then more, coming from the north road, kicking up red dust, moving fast, and sitting in the lead vehicle, a white pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun rusting in the back, was Commander Yusuf, sitting straight, calm, holding a printed list on a single sheet of paper. A list. I learned later what was on that list. Names, addresses, the names of every known Christian in the Karawa area, the names of the children in our underground congregation's small Bible school. 11 children, ages 18 months to 12 years, who met on Thursday afternoons to learn scripture from an old man named Pastor Elias, who had memorized the entire Gospel of John because he'd never owned a physical Bible in his life. 11 children. My 11 children. Commander Yusuf stepped out of the truck. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His men fanned out across the village with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this many, many times before. He walked to the center of the village square, where the old acacia tree stood, where the women sold ground nuts in the morning, and he unfolded his list. He looked at it. He looked up at the crowd being herded toward him at gunpoint, and he smiled that quiet schoolteacher smile. Kirawa, he said, almost gently, you have been sheltering kafir, infidels, people who reject the true faith and corrupt your children with their Isa worship. He folded the list carefully and put it in his breast pocket. Today, that ends. He nodded once, that was all, just one nod, and 30 seconds later, the screaming started. I was behind the millet field when it began. I had gone to fetch water for the evening, a 30-minute walk to the borehole and back, a routine so ordinary I had stopped thinking about it. I heard the motorcycles. I dropped the jerry can. The water spilled into the red earth and disappeared instantly like it had never existed, and something in my chest, something animal and ancient, said one word, run. But I didn't run, not yet, because I knew where the children were. Thursday afternoon, Pastor Elias, the mud brick house behind the millet fields. I ran toward the screaming instead of away from it. I found them already moving. Pastor Elias, 70 years old, bad knees, shuffling as fast as he could with a baby on his hip and 2 small boys clinging to his robe. He had heard the motorcycles too. He had already counted the children. He shoved them toward me without a word, his eyes fierce and clear and utterly unafraid in a way that I found both inspiring and terrifying. Go south, he said. The ravine. Don't stop. Don't look back. What about you? I said. He pressed the baby into my arms. The baby. That 18-month-old girl wrapped in torn taupe fabric. She looked at me with enormous dark eyes and did not cry. I have thought about that many times since. She did not cry. God and I have been talking for 70 years, Pastor Elias said quietly. We have things to settle between us. Go. I went. I didn't look back, but I heard it. A few minutes later, behind us, the sharp crack of a single gunshot. Just one. Clean, final. I ran harder. The children ran with me, the older ones grabbing the smaller ones. Musa, 12 years old, already the oldest, already carrying a boy on his back without being asked, running at my side with the focused silence of someone who had survived things no 12-year-old should have survived. We ran until the village was out of sight, until all that remained of Karawa was a faint orange glow against the black sky and the distant sound of Commander Yusuf's men celebrating. I had no food, no water, no fire, no weapon, no phone, no map. I had 11 children and a dead pastor's last instruction. Go south. And somewhere behind us, Commander Yusuf was unfolding his list again, checking names, and my name, I knew, was on it. They had seen me run. They had seen me take the children, and men like Commander Yusuf do not leave lists incomplete. They were coming. I had maybe 3 hours of darkness left to disappear into the desert, and that's when Musa looked up at the sky, this 12-year-old boy, this child who had already buried his mother, and said, without fear, without drama, like it was simply the most obvious truth in the world, Brother Dawit, we should pray to Yeshua. I looked at him. I looked at the 10 other children around me, exhausted, shaking, silent. And for the first time in my life, I didn't argue with that suggestion. But before I could open my mouth, that's when we heard the hyenas. Before that night in the ravine, before Commander Yusuf, before the hyenas and the impossible thing that happened after. I need to take you somewhere else first. I need to take you inside my chest, because what happened in that desert was not just a miracle of nature. It was the answer to a prayer that had been building for years, layer by layer, loss by loss, silence by silence, until it finally broke out of me like water through a cracked dam. And to understand why that moment shattered me completely, you need to understand what came before it. You need to understand how alone I was. My name is Dawit. I was born Muslim in a small town in the Borno state of northeastern Nigeria. My father was a devout man, not violent, not extreme, genuinely devout in the way that fills a home with a kind of structured peace. 5 prayers a day, Ramadan fasting kept with quiet discipline, Quran recitation in the evenings, his voice low and rhythmic, filling our small concrete house like incense. I grew up believing that Allah was close, that He was Al-Qarib, the near one, that He heard every whispered prayer before it even left your lips. I believed that with my whole heart, and then my whole heart got broken, systematically, completely. It started with my father. He was taken during a Boko Haram recruitment sweep when I was 15. Not killed, taken, which is somehow worse because killed means finished. Killed means grief with an ending. Killed means you can eventually close the chapter and breathe again. Taken means you spend the next 8 years looking at every face in every crowd, wondering if that man in the distance, that shadow in the doorway, is him, whether he is alive, whether he chose to stay, whether he even remembers your face. I prayed for him every single day for 8 years. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. I never heard anything back. Then my mother got sick. the kind of sickness that comes from grief and malnutrition and the specific exhaustion of being a woman alone in a conflict zone, holding a family together with nothing but her bare hands and her faith. She died in a displacement camp outside of Maiduguri when I was 19. She died on a Thursday. The camp medical officer had run out of the medication she needed 4 days earlier. 4 days. She died 4 days after the medicine ran out on a plastic cot in a tent that smelled of mildew and other people's suffering. I performed the Salat al-Janazah, the funeral prayer, over her body myself. There was no imam available. There was no family left to stand beside me. Just me and my mother's body and 50,000 refugees going about the desperate business of surviving while I stood there and prayed the words I had been taught and felt. Nothing, not comfort, not peace, not the warm presence of Al-Karib, the near one, nothing. Just the sound of my own voice in a plastic tent. Just the smell of mildew and grief. Just the vast crushing silence of a heaven that seemed to have its face turned away from the Borno state of Nigeria entirely. I want to be careful here. I am not saying Allah does not exist. I am not saying Muslims don't experience God. I am saying that I, Dawit, in that specific tent, on that specific Thursday, after 15 years of faithful prayer and immeasurable loss, I felt nothing. And the nothing was so loud it was almost a sound of its own. I kept praying anyway, because what else do you do? When prayer is the only tool you have, you keep using it even when it feels like swinging a hammer at fog. I prayed in the displacement camp. I prayed on the road to Karawa. I prayed in the millet fields. I prayed quietly, mechanically, the words worn smooth by repetition like river stones, still beautiful in their shape, still true in their intention, but somehow not reaching. Not reaching where? I couldn't have told you then. I only knew the distance, the terrible echoing distance between my lips and whatever was supposed to be listening. There was a woman in the camp at Maiduguri before I left for Kirawa. Her name was Sister Agnes, a Kenyan missionary, maybe 50 years old, with gray-streaked hair she kept tied back with a piece of green cloth, and the kind of eyes that looked at you like they were reading something written on the inside of your face. She ran an unofficial literacy class for the camp children, using whatever scraps of paper she could find. She was, technically, not supposed to be there. The camp administrators tolerated her because the children learned to read and the parents stopped complaining about the boredom. I avoided her for months. She was Christian, I was Muslim. In the Borno state, that line is not just theological, it is survival coded. You don't cross it casually. But one evening, I sat near her class by accident. I was tired. I sat down in the shade of a tarp. I didn't realize until I was already seated that I was 3 meters from a circle of children listening to her read from a battered paperback New Testament with half the cover missing. I should have moved. I didn't move. She was reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, Lazarus, the dead man in the cave, and she read the verse quietly without drama, like it was simply the most natural thing in the world. Jesus wept. I don't know why those 2 words hit me the way they did. I had heard about Isa in the Quran, a prophet, a healer, born of a virgin, taken up to heaven, respected, honored, but distant in the way all Quranic prophets felt distant to me then. Figures of history, figures of instruction, not figures who wept. But this Jesus, this Isa of Sister Agnes's battered paperback, wept over a dead friend in public, without shame, without theological composure. He just wept, and something cracked in my chest, something very small, something I didn't even fully register at the time. I got up and walked away before she could see my face. 3 weeks later, Commander Yusuf came to Kirawa. 2 days before the attack, Sister Agnes had been escorted out of the camp by the authorities. Someone had finally complained about her unauthorized ministry. She was being transferred. I saw her leaving, her green cloth hair tie still in place, her battered New Testament pressed against her chest. She saw me watching, and she stopped. She walked over to me, this woman I had barely spoken to, and she took my hand in both of hers and looked at me with those reading eyes. "You're going to face something very dark," she said, not like a prophecy, like someone stating an obvious fact. "When you do, when every door is closed and every human option is gone, call on Jesus. Just say his name. Say, 'Yeshua, I need you.' That's all. You don't need the right words. He hears the space between words." I pulled my hand back politely. "I am Muslim," I said. "I know," she said, and she smiled. "He loves Muslims, too." She walked away. 3 weeks later, I was in a desert ravine with 11 children, no water, no fire, a dead pastor behind me, a warlord's list in front of me, and a circle of hyenas tightening around us in the dark. And I heard Musa say, "Brother Dawit, we should pray to Yesu." And I heard Sister Agnes's voice in my memory like she was standing right beside me. "When every door is closed and every human option is gone, call on him." Every door was closed. Every human option was gone. I knelt in the red desert dirt. 11 children knelt with me, even the baby somehow settling into stillness against my chest as if she understood. Musa put his small hand on my shoulder. The hyena calls were close now. Very close. I could smell them, musky, rank, death-scented. I opened my mouth, and for the first time in my life, I didn't say Bismillah. I said Yeshua, just the name, barely a whisper, barely a breath, the single, most terrifying, and most honest word I had ever spoken. And then I waited, and at first, nothing. The hyenas kept laughing, the wind kept blowing, the orange glow of Kirawa kept dying on the horizon behind us, and I thought, of course, even this God is silent, but I was wrong, because silence was not what was coming. What was coming was him. I need to stop here for a moment, before I tell you what happened next, before I describe what walked out of that darkness. I need you to understand what it cost me to say that name. You need to understand that in the world I came from, saying Yeshua as a prayer, as a cry for help, as an act of genuine faith, was not just theologically controversial, it was not just culturally uncomfortable. In the Borno state of Nigeria, in a displacement camp surrounded by Boko Haram territory, in a community where your religious identity was the difference between being protected and being targeted, saying that name could get you killed. Not metaphorically, not eventually, immediately. I had watched it happen. I had watched a man in the Maiduguri camp be beaten unconscious by 3 other camp residents because someone heard him humming a Christian song he'd learned as a child before his conversion. A song, not a prayer, not a declaration of faith, a song. And they nearly killed him for it in broad daylight while the camp administrators looked the other way. So you understand, when I knelt in that ravine, in that darkness, with 11 children around me and hyenas closing in, and I opened my mouth and said, Yeshua, I was not being brave. I was not making a theological decision. I was a drowning man grabbing at the only piece of driftwood left in the water. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. My voice was barely a sound. And part of me, the part that had been shaped by 15 years of faithful Islamic practice, by my father's evening Quran recitations, by my mother's quiet bismillahs before every meal, that part of me was screaming, "What are you doing? This is shirk. This is associating partners with Allah. This is the one unforgivable thing. stop. And another part of me, a part I didn't even know existed until that moment, whispered back, "Then why has he never answered? Why the silence? Why the graves? Why the burning village behind you, and the dead pastor, and the 11 children, and the hyenas, and the... Why? If he is Al-Karib, the near one, where is he?" And that second voice won, not triumphantly, not dramatically, just quietly, the way exhaustion wins, the way a person stops swimming not because they've given up on life, but because they've simply run out of the strength to keep fighting the current. I stopped fighting and I prayed. I didn't know the right words. I still don't know if there are right words. I just talked. The way Sister Agnes said, "He hears the space between words." So I filled the space with everything I had. I didn't perform. I didn't recite. I just talked in the desperate, unpolished, grammatically imperfect way that a man talks when he has nothing left to lose. "Yeshua," I said, "I don't know you. I don't know if you know me. I am Muslim. I was Muslim. I don't know what I am right now. I don't know anything right now except that I have 11 children and I have no water and I have no fire and there are hyenas 20 meters away and there is a man with a list who wants to kill me and I have nothing. I have nothing. If you are real, if you are what Sister Agnes said you are, if you are what Pastor Elias believed so completely that he stood there and faced those men without flinching, then I need you to be real right now, not tomorrow, not in paradise, now. These children, look at these children. They did nothing. They are babies. Please, please." I stopped. My throat was too tight to continue. Moose's hand tightened on my shoulder. The baby against my chest made a small sound, not a cry, just a sound, like a sigh, like agreement. And I waited. The hyenas didn't stop. The wind didn't change. No voice spoke from the sky. And I want to be honest with you, completely honest, because this testimony is not a fairy tale, and I will not dress it up to be one. The miracle did not come in that first second. There was no immediate thunderclap, no sudden silence, no warm golden light descending from heaven the moment my prayer ended. What came first was something much smaller, much quieter, peace, not the peace of safety. We were not safe, not the peace of problems solved. The problems were still enormous, still closing in. Still laughing in that horrible spotted hyena way that sounds like human laughter gone wrong. But somewhere inside my chest, in the exact place where the terror had been living like a hot coal for 3 weeks, something shifted, like a fever breaking, like a knot releasing, and I know this sounds strange. I know it sounds insufficient to describe what I felt. Like someone had put their hand on the back of my neck and pressed gently, firmly, and said without words, "I am here. I see you. I have you. I cannot prove that to you. I cannot put it under a microscope. I cannot present it as evidence to a UN tribunal. All I can tell you is that Dawit, the man who had been running on pure adrenaline and sheer will for 72 hours, the man who had been holding himself together with nothing but the obligation of 11 children who needed him to not fall apart. That man felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, not alone. Let me tell you about the Bible page. 3 weeks before the attack on Karawa, maybe 4 days after I watched Sister Agnes walk away with her green hair tie and her battered New Testament, I was walking through the camp at dusk, kicking through the trash the way you do when you're depressed and directionless, and the act of lifting your feet completely off the ground feels like more effort than it's worth. And something stuck to my ankle, a piece of paper torn from a book, both edges ragged, like it had been ripped out roughly, maybe from a Bible that was being destroyed, burned or shredded, which happened in the camp sometimes when the more zealous residents found Christian materials. The paper was dirty, partially water-stained, but the text was still legible. I peeled it off my ankle. I almost dropped it. I don't know why I didn't. I held it up to the dying light and I read it. John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I am the way. Now I need to tell you about the second sign, because the peace was the first sign, the peace that passed all understanding. I know now that's actually a phrase from the Bible, Philippians 4:7, but I didn't know it then. I just felt it. Unexplainable, unearned, impossible given the circumstances. The second sign was the children. Musa, 12 years old, this boy who had been running on fear and determination for 3 days. Musa, after I finished my broken, imperfect, desperate prayer to Yeshua, began to sing quietly under his breath in Hausa, a song I didn't recognize. Later I learned it was a chorus from the underground church, something Pastor Elias had taught them on Thursday afternoons in that mud brick house behind the millet fields. A song about a shepherd who leaves the 99 to find the one who is lost. And one by one, I watched it happen in the dark. I watched it with my own eyes. The other children joined him. 10 children, ages 4 to 12, sitting in a desert ravine with hyenas circling, singing in whispered Hausa about a shepherd who does not abandon his sheep. The baby on my chest stopped fussing. She put her small hand flat against my sternum, right over the folded Bible page, and she patted it 3 times, gently, like she was comforting me, an 18-month-old child comforting me. I put my face in my free hand and I wept, completely and without dignity, in a way I had not wept since my mother died. And the weeping felt, I know this sounds wrong, I know it sounds backwards, but the weeping felt like relief, like releasing something I had been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my own body. And in the middle of that weeping, in the middle of those children singing, in the middle of the hyenas and the darkness and the distant orange death glow of Karawa, I heard something. Not a voice, not a roar, not yet. Something else. A change in the air. The specific electric quality of the atmosphere that you feel before a thunderstorm. That pressure shift that makes the hairs on your arms stand up and your lungs expand involuntarily, like your body is trying to take in more of whatever this new thing is before it disappears. I lifted my face from my hand. I looked north. Something was moving in the darkness, something large, something that moved with an unhurried, absolute confidence that nothing in that desert, not hyenas, not militia fighters, not the darkness itself, had any authority to disturb. Musa stopped singing. All the children went still. The hyena calls, which had been getting closer, tighter, more excited, the way they get when they've fully committed to an attack, went silent. Completely silent. The kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound. The kind of silence that is itself a presence. I couldn't see it clearly yet, just a shape, just a mass of darkness moving through darkness, low to the ground, massive, deliberate, and then it stepped into the thin edge of starlight, and I saw the mane, and every cell in my body went, not afraid. I want to be very specific about this because it matters enormously, not afraid. I had been afraid for 3 days straight. The specific, exhausting, grinding fear of a man being hunted. I knew what fear felt like in my body. This was not fear, this was awe. The specific, electric, knee-buckling awe of a human being in the presence of something so far outside the boundaries of normal reality that every category they've ever used to understand the world suddenly becomes insufficient. The lion was enormous. Fuller maned than any lion I had ever seen in photographs, the mane so thick and dark it seemed to absorb the starlight rather than reflect it. It moved without sound, not quietly, without sound, as if the normal acoustic rules of the physical world had suspended themselves out of respect for whatever this animal was carrying into our small circle of terrified humanity. It stopped, 10 feet away from me. Its eyes met mine, and I cannot fully explain what happened in that moment of eye contact. I have tried to explain it 100 times since, to UN workers, to pastors, to journalists, to skeptics, to the 17 people who converted that night, to you right now, and every time I try, language fails me in the same place. Because what I saw in that lion's eyes was not the blank, predatory assessment of a wild animal calculating whether I was worth the effort of killing. What I saw was recognition, like it knew me, like it had been sent for me, like it had a job to do and had arrived, unhurried and certain to do it. It turned its massive head away from me. It faced north, the direction the hyena sounds had been coming from, and it opened its mouth. I have heard lions roar in videos, in documentaries, through speakers and headphones and cinema sound systems. None of that, none of it prepares you for what a lion's roar sounds like when you are 10 feet away from it in an open desert at midnight. It is not just a sound, it is a physical event. The ground vibrated, my sternum vibrated. The baby on my chest, instead of screaming, went absolutely rigid. Not in terror, in that way babies go rigid sometimes when something overwhelms all their senses simultaneously and they simply stop and stare. The roar rolled out across the desert like a shockwave, and the hyenas gone. Not retreating slowly, not backing off cautiously, not the gradual withdrawal of animals reconsidering a tactical situation. Gone instantly. The laughing stopped mid-note like a recording cut off. 1 second circling, tightening, closing. The next, nothing. Not even retreating footsteps, just absence. The lion lowered its head. It walked, slowly, deliberately, and positioned itself between our small huddle of children and the direction the hyenas had come from. And then it lay down, in the dirt, in front of us, like a dog at a hearth, like a guardian at a gate. Musa looked at me. His face in the starlight was wet with tears, but his eyes were shining with something I recognized because I had just felt it myself, that same awe, that same category-breaking, world-reordering recognition of something utterly beyond normal reality. He said very quietly in Hausa, Yesu ya aiko shi. Jesus sent him. I looked at that lion. I looked at those 11 children. I looked down at my chest, at the faint outline of the folded Bible page under my shirt. I am the way, and I said, out loud, clearly, without shame, without theological hedging, without any of the careful, self-protective ambiguity I had been wrapping myself in for weeks. Yes, he did. I want you to understand something about hope, real hope, not the comfortable, decorative kind that sits on a motivational poster above someone's desk in a safe country, not the kind that costs nothing because it has never been tested against anything real. I mean the raw, cornered, last breath kind of hope. The kind that only exists because every single alternative has been methodically destroyed and hope is the only thing left standing in the rubble. That is the only kind of hope I have ever known. And that night, the night the lion came, hope almost didn't survive long enough to see the miracle because Commander Yusuf did not stop at Karawa. We had been in the ravine for maybe 2 hours when I heard the motorcycles again. I had been watching the lion. We all had. 11 children and 1 broken man sitting in the red desert dirt, watching a wild lion lie between us and the darkness like it was the most natural arrangement in the world. The smaller children had fallen asleep. the way young children can fall asleep even in crisis, their bodies overriding their terror with the blunt biological insistence of exhaustion. Musa was awake. He sat cross-legged, the baby in his lap now, watching the lion with those shining eyes, his lips moving in what I recognized as silent prayer. I had been praying too, not formally, not ritually, just talking, still in that broken, unpracticed way, the way you talk to someone you've just met but already trust with your life, telling Yeshua everything, the fear, the grief, my mother, my father, the years of silence, the burning village behind us, the children, the baby, please, please, and then the motorcycles, distant at first, maybe 2 kilometers north, but moving south and not wandering, tracking. The sound had that specific directional certainty that turns your blood cold, that hunting quality, that I know exactly where you are quality that no amount of darkness or distance can disguise once you've heard it enough times. I pressed my hand flat against the ground. I felt the vibration before I heard the engines clearly. Multiple vehicles, not just motorcycles. The deeper rumble of the white pickup truck underneath the high whine of the bikes. They had found our tracks. Of course they had. We had run in a straight line, exhausted, 3 children too small to walk on their own being carried, leaving a trail in the soft red sand that a blind man could have followed. I had been so focused on distance, just get far enough, that I hadn't thought about direction, about doubling back, about covering our path. Rookie mistake, desperate man mistake. And now, Commander Yusuf's trackers, men who had grown up in this desert, men who could read sand the way scholars read text, were following our story, footstep by footstep, straight to the ravine. I looked at the lion. The lion's ears had rotated, both of them simultaneously swiveling toward the north like satellite dishes locking onto a signal. Its eyes opened fully. It raised its head from its paws. But it didn't move. It just listened with a stillness that was not passivity but readiness, the specific coiled stillness of something that knows exactly what is coming and has already decided what it will do about it. I shook Musa's shoulder. "Wake the others," I whispered, quietly, quietly. Within 4 minutes, all 11 children were awake. The small ones confused, whimpering, shushed by the older ones with practiced efficiency. These children had been woken in the night before, had been taught by hard experience the discipline of silent fear. Musa distributed them without being asked. 2 older children flanking the smallest ones, everyone pressed low into the deepest part of the ravine, bodies against the red clay wall. I counted the headlights as they crested the low ridge to the north. 2 motorcycles, then 2 more, then the white truck, its headlights sweeping the terrain in long arcs, slow and systematic, like a lighthouse beam over dark water, searching, and behind the truck's windshield, illuminated briefly by the ambient glow of the dashboard, Commander Yusuf. Even at this distance, in this darkness, I recognized the stillness of him, that terrible schoolteacher composure, sitting straight, patient, unhurried, a man with complete confidence that what he was hunting would not escape him. He was right to be confident. By every logical calculation available, we were finished. The ravine had one entrance, the north end, where we had scrambled down 3 hours ago. The south end was a rock face, sheer, 8 feet high, completely unclimbable with small children. To the east and west, the ravine walls were steep and loose, crumbling red clay that would send us sliding back down the moment we tried to climb. We were in a bowl, a natural trap, and Commander Yusuf's convoy was about to pour into the only opening like water filling a cup. I did the calculation. The brutal arithmetic calculation of a man trying to find an exit that doesn't exist. 8 fighters minimum. I could count the silhouettes against the headlight glow. Armed with AK-47s, at least one RPG visible on the back of the truck. Commander Yusuf would not have left Karawa with less than a full unit for a retrieval operation. He was thorough, he was professional, he was systematic. Against them, me, no weapon, 11 children, a wild lion that, for all its magnificence, could not stop bullets. No escape route, no cover, no weapon, no help coming. This was it. This was the specific geography of certain death, and I felt it. The way you feel it when the last door closes, not panic. Panic had burned itself out hours ago. Something worse than panic. A cold, gray, settling certainty. The quiet of absolute checkmate. The silence of a man who has run out of moves and knows it. I looked at the children pressed against the ravine wall. Musa, still holding the baby, watching me with those steady eyes, trusting me, all of them trusting me, and I had nothing to give them. I was empty. I was done. I was a dead man who hadn't stopped moving yet. The motorcycle headlights were close enough now that I could see individual stones in the ravine floor lit by their glow. One of the younger boys, maybe 7 years old, a tiny boy named Johanna, who had not spoken a single word since we left Kirawa, who had been running on some private internal resource of silence that I found both heartbreaking and extraordinary. Johanna tugged my sleeve. I looked down at him. He pointed at the lion. The lion had stood up. Not in the lazy, stretching way a resting animal rises. It came up all at once, 4 legs, full height, in a single, fluid movement that seemed to compress a tremendous amount of power into a very small amount of time. It was facing north, facing the entrance to the ravine, facing the headlights, and it was no longer quiet. A sound was building in its chest, not yet a roar, something beneath a roar, something that I felt in my back teeth and my rib cage before I heard it with my ears. A deep, resonant, building presence of sound, like the moment before a thunderclap when the air pressure changes and every hair on your body stands up and your brain sends one urgent signal. Something massive is about to happen. The lead motorcycle entered the ravine. The rider saw the lion. He hit the brakes so hard the back wheel skidded sideways in the loose dirt, throwing a spray of red sand against the ravine wall. The motorcycle stalled. The rider, a young fighter, couldn't have been more than 20, holding an AK-47 across his handlebars, stared at the lion. The lion stared back. The second motorcycle came in behind the first and nearly collided with it, more shouting, swearing in Hausa and Arabic. The white truck idled at the ravine entrance, unable to enter because the motorcycles were blocking it. I heard Commander Yusuf's voice, that soft, patient schoolteacher voice, raised now with the specific irritation of a man whose efficient operation has been disrupted by something unexpected. What is the problem? Why have you stopped? The lead motorcycle rider called back, and I heard the shake in his voice even from 20 meters away. Commander, there is a lion, a very large lion, in the ravine. A pause. Push past it. It will run. Animals always run. The rider did not move. Commander, he said, it is not running. Another pause, longer this time. Then I heard the truck door open, footsteps in the sand, measured, deliberate. Commander Yusuf walking to the ravine entrance to see for himself. The specific sound of a man who does not believe in problems he hasn't personally verified. He came to the entrance. He looked in. I could see his face in the peripheral glow of the headlights. For the first time since I had laid eyes on Commander Yusuf Maiduguri, this composed, soft-spoken, systematically murderous man, I saw his face do something I had not thought it capable of. It went uncertain, not afraid, not yet, but uncertain. The specific micro-expression of a man encountering something that doesn't fit into any category his experience has prepared him for. His eyes moved from the lion to the children to me and back to the lion, calculating, reassessing. "Shoot it," he said finally. "Shoot the lion." One of the fighters raised his AK-47, and Musa, 12 years old, this extraordinary boy, Musa stood up. He stepped out from behind me. He stood fully upright in the ravine, baby on his hip, and he looked directly at Commander Yusuf across 20 meters of charged, lion-guarded darkness, and he said, in a voice that did not shake, not even slightly, "Wallahi, you cannot shoot this lion. Allah himself would not give you that shot, because this is not our lion." Commander Yusuf looked at this 12-year-old boy for a long moment. "Then whose lion is it?" he said. Musa didn't hesitate. "Yesu neya aikoshi," he said. "Jesus sent him." The silence that followed was the longest silence I have ever lived inside, longer than it has any right to have been. A silence that seemed to expand, to fill the ravine, to push outward against the clay walls. And in that silence, the lion roared. Not the warning sound from before, the roar, the full, unrestrained, earth-shaking declaration of a mature male lion at full voice from 10 feet away, directed straight at the entrance of the ravine where Commander Yusuf and his 8 fighters stood. I cannot describe it adequately. I have already told you this, and I am telling you again because I need you to understand that my inadequacy here is not laziness. It is the honest limitation of human language confronting something that operates outside human scale. The sound was not just loud, it was authoritative in a way that bypassed the thinking brain entirely and spoke directly to something older, deeper, more fundamental, some ancient, pre-rational layer of human consciousness that remembers at a cellular level what it means to be small and mortal in a world that contains things enormously more powerful than yourself. Every fighter stepped back, every single one of them, simultaneously, without a command, without a discussion, without the coordination of trained soldiers following orders, just back, the pure, involuntary physical response of 8 human bodies receiving a message their nervous systems could not ignore. Commander Yusuf did not step back. I will give him that. He stood his ground, but his hand, the hand that was reaching for the pistol at his hip, stopped, froze halfway to the weapon, and stayed there like something was holding it. The lion roared again. Commander Yusuf's hand dropped to his side. He looked at the lion. He looked at me. He looked at Musa with the baby on his hip. He looked at the 9 other children pressed against the ravine wall, looking back at him with the wide, exhausted, unafraid eyes of children who had just witnessed enough impossible things that one more barely registered. And I saw it happen. I saw the moment when Commander Yusuf Maiduguri, systematic, composed, efficient, murderous Commander Yusuf, encountered the edge of his own certainty, the place where his map ran out, where his experience provided no guidance, where his authority meant nothing because the thing in front of him did not recognize his authority, had never been briefed on his reputation, and was operating under instructions from a completely different chain of command. He took one step back, then another. "Fall back," he said quietly, in that same soft voice, but something had gone out of it, some quality of absolute confidence that had always underlain the softness before. "Fall back to the vehicles." "Commander," one of the fighters said. "The Christians." I said, "Fall back." "But the list." "Fall back." The fighters retreated. The motorcycles reversed out of the ravine with none of the smooth, tactical efficiency of their entry. Scrambling, awkward, urgent, the white truck's engine revved. I heard doors slamming. I heard the high whine of the motorcycles accelerating north, away from us, back toward Karawa. Commander Yusuf was the last to leave. He stood at the ravine entrance for one more moment, looking in at us, looking at the lion, which had not moved, which was still standing between us and him with that absolute, unhurried, commissioned certainty. And I saw Commander Yusuf do something I never expected. He looked at me, directly at me, and for 1 second, just one, his face showed something that was not composure, not calculation, not the pedagogical patience of a man explaining consequences to a village that has failed to comply. It showed fear, real fear, the kind that lives in the gut, not the mind, the kind that no ideology can fully armor a man against because it operates below the level of ideology in the older country of the human animal where certain things are simply known. Then he turned and walked back to his truck, and the desert swallowed the sound of his convoy going north until there was nothing left but wind and starlight and the breathing of 11 children and one enormous, impossible, God-sent lion standing guard in the red dirt of a Nigerian ravine. I sat down. My legs simply stopped working, not from injury, from the specific physical aftermath of sustained extreme terror finally releasing its grip on a human body all at once. I sat down in the dirt and I put my face in my hands. Musa sat down beside me. He put the sleeping baby between us. He put his arm around my shoulders, this 12-year-old boy putting his arm around a grown man, and he said nothing. He just sat there, present, solid, impossibly calm. The lion lay back down between us and the north, and I pressed my hand against my chest, against the folded page, against the words worn soft by 100 desperate readings. I am the way, I am the way, I am the way. And for the first time since my mother died on that plastic cot in a tent that smelled of mildew, for the first time since my father disappeared into Boko Haram's shadow, for the first time in longer than I could honestly remember, I felt found, not safe, not rescued yet, not out of danger. Commander Yusuf would regroup. Dawn was coming, and with it, new calculations, new approaches, new entries on his methodical list. But found, like the shepherd in Musa's song, the one who leaves the 99, the one who comes after you, the one who doesn't consult a cost-benefit analysis before deciding whether a single lost sheep in a ravine full of hyenas and militia fighters is worth the trip. He came after me. He came after us. And the impossible thing, the thing I am still, years later, not fully able to wrap my mind around, is that he didn't send an army. He sent a lion, one lion, because one lion under his authority was enough. Dawn was 3 hours away. The lion did not move, and I closed my eyes, not in despair, not in terror, but in the specific surrendered peace of a man who has finally stopped trying to save himself. And I waited for morning. I did not sleep that night, not 1 minute, not 1 second. I sat in that ravine with my back against the red clay wall, and I watched the sky change. The specific, unhurried, magnificent process of an African night surrendering to an African dawn, the stars fading one by one like candles being pinched out by invisible fingers, the darkness thinning from black to deep purple to a bruised, luminous blue. And I watched the lion. For 3 hours it did not move, not to drink, not to stretch, not to scan the perimeter in the restless pacing way of a caged animal. It simply lay there, paws extended, head up, eyes open, facing north, watching the direction Commander Yusuf had retreated with the focused, permanent attention of a sentry who has been given one instruction and intends to fulfill it completely regardless of how long it takes. I have thought many times about what I must have looked like in those 3 hours. A hollow-eyed man in torn clothes, covered in red dust, clutching a folded scrap of paper against his chest, watching a lion watch the darkness. If someone had photographed me in that moment, some passing UN aerial survey, some satellite catching a thermal signature in the Diffa corridor, what would they have seen? A man and an animal in a ravine, two living things sharing a piece of desert. Nothing extraordinary about that from altitude. But from inside that ravine, from inside that specific pocket of reality that God had folded around 11 children and one broken man and one enormous impossible lion, everything was extraordinary. The air itself felt different. That thickness I had first noticed when the lion arrived, that warm, pressurized, inhabited quality, like the atmosphere inside a cathedral, like the specific weight of a space where something holy has recently occurred or is continuously occurring. It hadn't left. It deepened as the night went on, as if the longer the lion stayed, the more firmly whatever was holding this moment together was anchoring itself to the physical world. Musa woke twice. Both times he looked at the lion, nodded as if confirming something to himself, and went back to sleep, 12 years old, sleeping peacefully in a desert ravine with a wild lion 8 feet away. The faith of a child who had been taught by Pastor Elias that Yesu does not abandon his sheep. The faith I was only beginning in the rawest and most tentative way to understand. Dawn came at 5:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because one of the older girls, a quiet, serious 11-year-old named Hadiza, who had somehow managed to keep a small solar-powered wristwatch through everything, checked it when the first full light crested the horizon. She showed it to me solemnly, like it was important data, like she was documenting something for a record she intended to submit to someone with authority. She was right to document it. The light came in low and golden and absolutely horizontal, the way Sahel dawn light does, not gradually brightening from above, but arriving suddenly from the east like a door opening, painting everything in a color that is halfway between amber and fire. It hit the lion first, the mane, that extraordinary, impossible mane, darker than any lion mane I had seen in any photograph, so thick it seemed to have its own gravity. Caught the dawn light and held it. The lion seemed to glow, not supernaturally, not with the cartoon gold of a children's Bible illustration, but in the real physical way that living things with textured surfaces catch directional light and become briefly, staggeringly beautiful. The children woke up one by one, blinking, stiff, confused for a disoriented half-second before memory reasserted itself, and then, one by one, they looked at the lion, still there, still facing north, still present, and one by one they smiled. Children who had watched their village burn, children who had lost parents, children who had been running for their lives through desert darkness, they smiled. Not the performed brave smile of people trying to reassure each other, real smiles, the specific spontaneous smile of people who have been given evidence, undeniable, physical, concrete evidence that someone who is bigger than their problem is paying attention. I watched those smiles and something in my chest did something I don't have a word for, something between breaking and healing, something that felt like both at the same time. The lion stayed through the entire first day. I need you to understand the implications of that sentence. A wild lion, an adult male, which in normal circumstances requires 15 to 25 pounds of meat per day to sustain itself, which is territorial, which ranges across enormous distances, which has absolutely no biological or instinctual reason to remain in a stationary position in a desert ravine for extended periods, stayed. It did not hunt, did not leave to drink, did not sleep in the vulnerable, sprawled flat way of a well-fed animal, It rested with the controlled, aware, intermittent rest of a guard on duty, eyes closing briefly, then opening, scanning the terrain, closing again, always facing north, always between us and the direction the threat had come from. During that first day, Commander Yusuf's convoy came back twice. The first time was mid-morning. We heard them, the motorcycle engines, approaching from the north. And every child who had been cautiously, tentatively beginning to relax went rigid simultaneously, the way prey animals do when a predator scent reaches them. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. I felt my hand go to the folded Bible page automatically, pressing it against my chest like a compress against a wound. The lion stood up, that was all. It simply stood up, full height, facing north, and it roared. Not the full earth-shaking declaration of the night before, but a shorter, sharper, warning roar, the kind that means, I am still here, I have not left, you know what happened last time, make your decision accordingly. The motorcycles slowed. We heard them idle for maybe 30 seconds. I imagined them at the ridge, looking down at the ravine, seeing the lion, doing the arithmetic. The motorcycles turned around. The second approach came in the early afternoon from a different direction, east this time, as if Commander Yusuf had spent the morning reconsidering his angles. 3 motorcycles moving more cautiously, trying to approach from a direction the lion's attention might not be covering. The lion's head turned east before I could even hear the engines clearly. I don't know how it knew. I cannot explain the sensory mechanism. I only know that its head turned east with the same fluid, certain movement as a compass needle finding north, not searching, not scanning, just going directly to the correct orientation as if it had received a signal we couldn't perceive. It stood, it walked to the eastern wall of the ravine and positioned itself there, and when the motorcycles crested the eastern approach and the lead rider saw a lion standing directly in his path at close range, I heard the bikes skid, I heard shouting, I heard them leave. After that, Commander Yusuf did not come back, not that day. The second day was different. The terror of the first day, the sustained adrenaline, the constant listening for engines, the breath held against every distant sound, began to subside, not completely, not foolishly, but enough for other things to surface. Hunger, thirst, the practical, pressing reality of 11 children who had not had water in over 36 hours. I had been trying not to think about water, trying not to think about what dehydration does to small children in Sahel heat, the specific, rapid, merciless way it works, especially in the under 5s, the way a child can move from uncomfortable to critical in a matter of hours when the temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius and there is no shade except the thin shadow of a ravine wall. The baby hadn't nursed since her mother was taken. I had been giving her what little water I could source, dew from the clay walls in the early morning, condensation from the cooler rocks at night, but it wasn't enough. Her lips were cracking. Her eyes were losing that bright present quality. She was becoming quieter in the wrong way. I knelt in the dirt. I pressed my hand against my chest. I said, Yeshua, water, please. I don't know how. I don't know where. But these children need water, and I don't have any, and you do. Please. I opened my eyes, and Hyenas, the small boy, the one who hadn't spoken since we left Karawa, the one who had tugged my sleeve to show me the lion the night before, Hyenas was standing at the south end of the ravine, at the base of the sheer rock face. He was looking down at something. He turned and looked at me and pointed. I walked to him. At the base of the rock face, in a shallow depression in the stone, a natural basin maybe the size of a serving bowl, there was water, clear water, still, cold, in the middle of the Sahel, in a ravine I had examined thoroughly the night before and found no water source in, at the base of a rock face that had been bone dry when I checked it during the night. Cold water. I stared at it for a long time. I put my fingers in it, real, physical, cold, not just cool, cold, colder than the ambient temperature had any explanation for, colder than groundwater at this depth in this geography should have been. I cupped it in my palms and brought it to my lips. Pure, clean, no mineral taste, no sediment, none of the iron salt heaviness of Sahel groundwater. Clean the way only two things are clean: filtered water from a modern system or something else. I called the children. We drank, all of us, Musa holding the baby, tipping tiny, careful sips between her cracked lips and her eyes, those enormous dark eyes, brightening again, that terrible quietness receding as hydration did what only hydration can do. I watched her come back to herself, sip by sip, and I wept again. I was doing a lot of weeping in those days. I make no apology for it. The basin refilled. I need you to hear that. We drank it empty, 11 children and 1 adult, drinking with cupped hands and cupped leaves and the small plastic lid from Hadiza's wristwatch used as a tiny cup for the baby. We drank it to the bare stone, and over the next hour, slowly, the water returned, not flowing in from a visible source, not seeping up through a crack I could identify, just returning, like the basin had a floor that was connected to something that didn't run out. We drank 3 times that day. The basin was never empty when a child needed it. The lion stayed through the second night. I slept this time, properly, deeply, in the specific, profound way of a body that has finally been given permission to release. I curled around the children in the dirt, and I slept like a man who has handed his problems to someone who can actually handle them, because that is exactly what I had done. I dreamed of my mother. She was standing in light, not the orange firelight of Karawa burning, not the harsh fluorescent light of the camp medical tent where she died, but a different kind of light, warm, white, sourceless, the kind of light that isn't illuminating anything because everything in it is already inherently visible. She was smiling. Not the tired, grief-held, trying to be strong smile she had worn for the last years of her life. The real one, the one from before my father was taken, from before everything, from my earliest childhood memories. The smile that meant all is well, all is well, all will be well. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I woke up with my face wet and my chest full of something I eventually found a word for. Gratitude. The third morning, I knew, in the way you know things when you have been stripped of everything except the most essential perceptions, that this was the day we moved. Something in the quality of the morning felt different, purposeful, like a held breath about to be released. The children felt it too. They woke earlier than the previous days without being roused, with a quiet alertness that felt like anticipation rather than fear. The lion was standing, not in its guard position facing north, standing differently, facing south. For the first time in 3 days, it was facing south, and it was looking at me, directly at me. I stood up. It took a step south, stopped, looked back at me, took another step south. I looked at Musa. Musa was already gathering the smallest children, already organizing the older ones, already picking up the baby with the practiced confidence of someone who has long since stopped requiring explanation for instructions that come from sources he trusts. It wants us to follow, he said, simply, as if this were unremarkable. We followed. What happened over the next 4 hours is something I have described so many times that the words have become worn smooth, but the reality of it has never worn smooth. The reality of it is as raw and immediate as it was the moment it happened, and I believe it will be until the day I die. The lion walked south. We walked behind it. It moved at a pace that was perfectly calibrated to the slowest child in our group, the 4-year-old twins who were too big to carry continuously but too small to walk fast. When they fell behind, the lion slowed. When they stumbled, it stopped and waited. When the baby fussed and I had to pause to settle her, the lion stood and looked back with that patient, commissioned certainty and waited for me to be ready. It avoided the direct sun where possible, leading us along the shadow lines of rock formations, through the cooler corridors between sandstone outcroppings, in routes that felt deliberate, chosen, navigated by something that understood the terrain and the temperature and the fragility of the small humans it was shepherding in a way that went far beyond instinct. We saw no militia, we heard no motorcycles. Commander Yusuf, with his list and his quiet smile and his efficient violence, Commander Yusuf was simply absent from every road, every ridge, every approach we crossed. 3 hours of open desert travel that should have intersected with at least 2 of his patrol routes, given what I knew of his operational patterns. We crossed those routes, nothing, as if the patrols had been redirected or delayed or were looking somewhere else, somewhere that was precisely not where we were. I have no explanation for that, or I have never had an explanation for that. I have only the fact of it. At 11:23 in the morning, Hadiza checked her watch and told me immediately, with that same solemn data preservation seriousness. We crested a low rise of red sand and I saw it. The refugee camp, a UN-operated IDP settlement, the white UNHCR tents spreading across the flat ground below us like a field of irregular white flowers, the blue and white UN vehicles visible at the perimeter, the thin smoke of cooking fires rising in vertical lines in the still morning air, maybe 2 kilometers away. Safe, safe. I stopped walking. I couldn't move for a moment. My legs locked and my vision went strange. The specific tunnel vision of overwhelming relief hitting a nervous system that has been running on cortisol and prayer for 72 hours. And I put my hand over my mouth and I stood there on that red sand rise and I looked at those white tents and I understood in my entire body, not just my mind, what the word deliverance means, not as a theological concept, as a physical, lived, real event. Deliverance is when the thing that was going to kill you doesn't, and you are standing on a hill looking at proof of it. The lion stopped beside me, not behind me. Beside me, it stood at my left shoulder, close enough that I could have reached out and touched the mane without fully extending my arm. Close enough to feel the heat radiating off its body, that incredible animal warmth. Dense and alive and present, it looked at the camp. It looked at me, and I turned and I looked at it for the last time. In full daylight, I could see things I hadn't been able to see in the dark of the ravine. The specific amber brown of the irises, warm, deep, with a quality of awareness in them that I am not going to qualify or explain away or dress in the language of projection and anthropomorphism. I saw what I saw. I know what awareness looks like in eyes, human or otherwise. I know what it looks like when a living being sees you, not the space you occupy, not the movement you represent, not the caloric value you might provide, but you, your specific personhood, your name. This lion saw me. He saw me through this animal, wearing this animal like a garment the way he wore flesh in Bethlehem. He saw me. Dawit, the Muslim boy from Borno State whose father disappeared and whose mother died and who had spent 15 years praying into silence and running from violence and had never, not once, felt found. He saw me. And the lion, I will say this plainly and I will not soften it and I will not call it pareidolia or wishful interpretation. The lion dipped its head. Not a stumble, not a random movement. A bow, deliberate, brief, weighted with something that had no business existing in the body language of a wild animal and existed there anyway. A bow. I went to my knees in the red sand, not because I was weak. because it was the only appropriate physical response to what was happening, because there are moments when the human body, without consulting the human mind, simply assumes the posture of worship, because worship is the only container large enough to hold what is being experienced. I pressed my forehead to the ground, and I said out loud, clearly, without the whisper of the first prayer, without the terrified tentativeness of a man committing theological treason, I said, Yeshua, you are Lord. You are the way and the truth and the life. You came for me. You came for me. I am yours. Whatever is left of my life, it is yours. All of it. Take it. Use it. I am yours. The children knelt around me, all 11 of them, without being asked, without instruction. Musa, Hadiza, Johanna, who hadn't spoken, the twins, the baby held against Musa's chest. They knelt in a circle in the red sand on the ridge above the refugee camp, and they prayed, each in their own way, each in their own words, some in Hausa, some in fragments of English from Pastor Elias's Thursday lessons, some in sounds that weren't words at all, but were unmistakably prayer. I lifted my head. The lion was gone, not retreating. Gone. I had not heard it leave, had not seen it turn between the moment I pressed my forehead to the ground and the moment I lifted it. Gone, as completely and finally as if it had simply stepped out of the physical world, back through whatever door it had entered from. I scanned the terrain in every direction. Nothing, no movement, no shape, no disturbance in the sand that I could read as recent large animal tracks. Gone. The children looked where it had been. They looked at me. Musa smiled. That specific, knowing, completely unsurprised smile of a boy who has understood something about the nature of God that most adults spend their entire lives trying to reach. Aikin Shiyakare, he said. His work is finished. I stood up. I picked up the baby. I looked at the white tents 2 kilometers south, and I walked my 11 children down the hill into safety. I want to address you directly for a moment, right now, before chapter 7, before the witnesses, before the UN doctor and Abdul the fighter and the 17 conversions, right now. If you are watching this and you are in your own ravine, not a desert in Niger maybe, but your own version, your own encirclement, your own midnight with hyenas closing in and no exit visible. If you have been praying and hearing nothing, if the silence has been so long and so complete that you have started to wonder whether anyone is listening, whether anyone is there, whether faith is simply the most elaborate coping mechanism humans have invented for the unbearable fact of our smallness, I need you to hear this. The lion didn't come because I had the right theology. I didn't have theology. I had a torn piece of paper and a dead pastor's last instruction and a 12-year-old boy's hand on my shoulder and absolutely nothing else. The lion didn't come because I was worthy. I was a broken, terrified, theologically confused Muslim man in a ditch who had run out of every option except the one he'd been afraid to try. The lion came because I called, that's all. That's the whole secret. That is the entire mechanism. Call, not with perfect words, not with correct doctrine, not after cleaning yourself up and sorting yourself out and becoming the kind of person who deserves to be answered. Call from the ditch, call from the ravine, call with your face in the dirt and your voice shaking and your theology in pieces and your hope nearly gone. Call. Because he is the shepherd who leaves the 99, and he will come into your ravine. I am living proof. When we walked into that camp, I looked like a man who had died and forgotten to lie down. I know this because the first thing the gate guard said when he saw me was not, "Can I help you?" or "Where did you come from?" It was, in English, with a specific alarm of someone assessing a medical situation. Sir, are you injured?" I looked down at myself. torn clothes, feet wrapped in strips of fabric torn from my outer robe because the soles had worn through somewhere on the second day, red dust covering every surface of my body, hair, eyebrows, the inside of my nostrils, the creases of my knuckles. 3 days of desert sun and fear and impossible provision written on my face in a language anyone could read. 11 children behind me, equally destroyed, equally alive. And the baby in my arms, pink-cheeked, bright-eyed, healthy. 3 days in the Sahel heat without her mother, without proper nutrition, drinking supernatural water from a rock basin. And she looked, the gate guard told me later, like she had just woken from a good nap. He called for the medical team, and that is where my story stopped being just mine. Her name was Dr. Amara Diallo, Guinean by birth, French educated, 12 years with Médecins Sans Frontières before joining the UNHCR medical response team in the Difa corridor. She was 41 years old. She had seen everything a 12-year career in the world's worst humanitarian crises produces in a person. And she had the specific professional composure of someone who has learned to keep their face still while their mind processes information that would make a civilian weep. She kept her face still for approximately 4 minutes after we were brought into the medical tent. Then she stopped pretending. She examined the children first, methodically, systematically, the way a doctor trained in crisis medicine examines patients when she is expecting to find catastrophic dehydration, malnutrition, exposure injuries. She checked eyes, checked gums, checked skin turgor. That test where you pinch the skin on the back of the hand and watch how quickly it snaps back, which tells you everything about hydration status. She checked the baby with particular care because 18-month-olds have the least physiological reserve, the shortest distance between fine and critical. She finished her examination. She sat back in her folding chair. She looked at me. "These children have been in the open desert for 3 days," she said. It was not a question. I had already given the camp administrator a brief account at intake. "Yes," I said, "without consistent access to clean water. We had water from a rock basin in the ravine." She looked at me for a moment. "Describe the water." I described it, the cold, the clarity, the refilling. The fact that I had searched that basin the night we arrived and found it dry. She wrote something in her notebook. Then she looked up. "Mr. Dawit, I am going to tell you something as a medical professional with 12 years of field experience in sub-Saharan crisis zones." She paused. "The youngest child, the infant, should be in critical condition. By every physiological model I have been trained to apply, this child should be showing severe signs of dehydration and early-stage malnutrition. Instead," she tapped her notebook, "she is showing no signs of dehydration, none. Her skin turgor is normal, her mucous membranes are moist, her fontanelle is flat, she is alert and responsive." Another pause. "Medically, I cannot account for this. I'm going to be honest with you. I cannot account for any of their conditions given what you've described." I said, "I can account for it." She said, "I know you can. Tell me about the lion." I stared at her. "How do you know about the lion?" She turned her notebook around and showed me what she'd written, not during our conversation, but before it, before I had said a single word about what happened in the ravine. 3 words written in her neat, precise handwriting at the top of a fresh page, with a question mark after them. "Lion, Daniel." I felt the hair on my arms stand up. "How?" I said again. She set the notebook down. "Because you are the 3rd person this week to come into this camp from the Difa corridor with a version of this story." The air went out of my lungs. "The first," she said, "was a woman. Solo. She came in 2 days ago from the direction of Gudumaria. She said a lion walked beside her for an entire day when militia fighters were tracking her. She said it disappeared when she reached a village. She is Christian, Kanuri background. The second, she continued, came in yesterday morning, a man, former Boko Haram fighter, not active. He'd been trying to leave for months. He came to us because, she paused and looked at her notes, because he says he saw the lion and it frightened him badly enough that he wanted to speak to a Christian pastor. He specifically requested a Christian pastor. We connected him with the camp's ecumenical chaplain this morning. She looked at me steadily. I have been in this work for 12 years, she said. I have documented things I cannot explain. Things that do not fit into the frameworks I was trained to use. I stopped being an atheist about 6 years ago, not because someone convinced me with an argument, but because I accumulated too much evidence in the field to maintain the position honestly. She tapped her pen against the table. What I am telling you, Mr. Dawit, is that you are not the only witness to what I believe was the same animal or the same event. She leaned forward slightly. I need you to write down everything, every detail, every time, every direction the lion faced, the water, all of it, because in 20 years of fieldwork I have never documented a wild lion behaving this way, and I intend to document it now. I took her pen. I wrote for 2 hours, but Dr. Diallo was not the witness who broke me open. That was Abdul. Abdul Musa Karim was 23 years old. He had been with Commander Yusuf's unit for 4 years, recruited at 19, the way most of them are recruited, through a combination of economic desperation and ideological pressure that starts with a free meal and ends with a Kalashnikov. He was not a commander. He was not a strategist. He was a foot soldier, one of the men on the motorcycles, one of the 8 who had approached our ravine twice and retreated twice. He came to the camp 3 days after we arrived. He came alone, no weapon, wearing civilian clothes, the specific, deliberate vulnerability of a man who has made a decision and is presenting himself unarmed to demonstrate the sincerity of it. He asked at the gate for the man with the 11 children. The gate guard came and got me. I stood at the camp perimeter and I looked at Abdul Musa Karim and I thought, I know your face. I saw your face in the headlights. I saw you take a step back when the lion roared. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said in Hausa, I need to tell you what I saw. And then I need you to tell me about Yesu. We sat under a thorn tree at the camp perimeter, just the 2 of us. The man who had come to kill me and the man he had come to kill, sitting under a thorn tree in the Sahel morning. He talked for a long time. The first night, he said, when we came to the ravine, I was the lead motorcycle. I was first in. I saw the lion first. He stopped. He looked at his hands. Brother, I have been in this work for 4 years. I have seen things. I am not, he paused. I am not someone who frightens easily. That is the truth. But when I saw that lion, he stopped again. I waited. It was not just a lion, he said finally. I know what a lion is. I have seen lions in the bush passing through. I know what a lion looks like when it sees a man, when it is deciding, when it is afraid or angry or hungry. He met my eyes. This lion was none of those things. This lion was stationed, like a soldier at a post, like something put there by, he gestured upward, by authority, not animal authority, a different kind. I said nothing. When the commander said to shoot it, Abdul continued, I raised my gun. I had a clear shot. I have made harder shots than that. His jaw tightened. I could not pull the trigger, I physically could not. My finger would not move. I tried. I am telling you this exactly as it happened. My finger would not move on that trigger. He looked at his right hand as if it still confused him. The commander thought I was afraid. I let him think that. The truth is, something stopped my hand. Something I felt, not saw, felt like. He searched for the word. Like a wall, he said. An invisible wall between my trigger finger and the movement it needed to make. I felt every cell in my body respond to that. A bullet-stopping, trigger-freezing, invisible wall. The same wall that had stood between us and the militia. The same wall I had felt as warmth and peace in the ravine. The same wall, just experienced from the other side by the man who had been trying to breach it. The second approach, Abdul said. The eastern approach, I watched the lion's head turn. Before we could hear the engines from inside the ravine, it turned directly east. Already knew we were coming, already repositioned. He shook his head. I told the commander that night, this is different. This is not a stray lion. This is something else. He told me I was weak, that I had become soft, that I was disgracing the jihad. He paused. I left the unit that night, he said. Commander Yusuf's unit. I left. I walked away. I stared at him. You left. I walked away, he confirmed, in the middle of the night, with nothing, because I could not. He pressed both hands flat on his thighs. I could not continue to be part of something that a lion refused to allow. Do you understand what I am saying? If God sent that lion, and I believe he did, I believe it with everything in me, then I was on the wrong side of God, and I could not stay there. The silence between us was full of things neither of us knew how to say yet. Then Abdul said, the Christian boy, the 12-year-old, he said Yesu sent the lion. Yes, I said, he did. How does a 12-year-old know that? I thought about Musa, about Pastor Elias teaching the Gospel of John from memory in a mud brick room, about Musa sleeping peacefully in a ravine with a lion 8 feet away because his faith was so clean and uncomplicated that the impossible had simply been the expected response of a God Musa knew personally and trusted completely. Because he knows Yesu, I said, personally, the way you know a father. Abdul looked at me for a long time. Can I know him, he said, a man like me, with the things I have done. And I, Dawit, the former Muslim, the man who 2 weeks ago didn't know how to pray to Jesus and had used a torn page and a dead woman's last instruction as his entire theological foundation. I looked at this former militia fighter under a thorn tree in the Sahel, and I said the only thing I knew with absolute certainty. He came for me in a ravine with nothing to recommend me. He will come for you. Abdul Musa Karim put his face in his hands, and he wept, and I put my hand on his shoulder, the same way Musa had put his hand on mine, and I prayed, broken, imperfect, unqualified, real prayer for this man. With this man, he prayed to Jesus that afternoon under a thorn tree in the Difa corridor, a former Boko Haram fighter. He prayed to Jesus, I need to tell you about the others, because Abdul was not alone in what he had seen, and Abdul was not alone in what he did about it. Over the following 2 weeks, 5 more of Commander Yusuf's fighters came to the camp, not together, separately, days apart, each one arriving the same way Abdul had, alone, unarmed, civilian clothes, asking for the man with the 11 children. Each one with a version of the same story, the lion, the trigger that wouldn't move, the sense of standing at the boundary of something their ideology had not prepared them for, the walk away from Commander Yusuf's unit in the middle of the night. 5 former fighters, all 6, Abdul plus 5, prayed to receive Jesus within 3 weeks of the miracle in the ravine. The camp's ecumenical chaplain, Father Jerome, a Chadian Catholic priest with the build of a former rugby player and the gentleness of someone who has spent 30 years in conflict zones, documented each conversion personally. He told me, with tears in his eyes, that in 30 years of ministry in some of the hardest places on earth, he had never seen anything like it. It is Acts 9, he said. What happened to Paul on the Damascus road? Except God used a lion instead of a light. I thought about that for a long time. Acts 9. The persecutor encountered by the living God, converted, transformed, deployed. The hunter becoming the healed. The man with the list becoming the man with the testimony. Except God used a lion instead of a light. And then there were the 11 children. I need to tell you about what happened with Johanna. Johanna, the small boy, 7 years old, the one who hadn't spoken since we left Kirawa, the one who showed me the water, the one who had been running on some private internal resource of silence for 3 days. On the 4th day in the camp, Johanna spoke, his first words in 4 days. He walked up to me while I was sitting outside the medical tent in the early morning, and he tugged my sleeve. The same gesture, the same small hand, the same patient insistence as the night he showed me the water and the night he showed me the lion. I looked down at him, he said, in clear, unhurried Hausa, as if he had simply been waiting for the right moment. Brother Dawit, the lion told me your mother is well. I could not speak. In the night, he said, I saw the lion in my dream, and your mother was beside it. And she was smiling, and the lion said to tell you, she is well, she was always going to be well. A 7-year-old boy, who hadn't spoken in 4 days, who knew nothing about my mother, nothing about my dream of her in the light, nothing about the years of grief I had been carrying for her, the specific unanswered question of a son who watched his mother die in a displacement camp and couldn't stop wondering, was she all right? Did she make it? Is she somewhere or is she nowhere? He knew nothing, and he told me everything. I held Johanna for a long time that morning, this small, silent, extraordinary boy. I held him until I could breathe again, and he patted my back with that same patient, matter-of-fact gentleness, the same way the baby had patted my chest over the Bible page. And then he went off to find something to eat because he was 7 years old, and theology only holds a child's attention for so long when there is food somewhere in the vicinity. There is one more witness I need to tell you about. Dr. Amara Diallo, the UNHCR doctor, the former atheist with the neat handwriting and the notebook, she filed a report, not the standard medical intake report, a separate report submitted to the UNHCR regional office in Niamey and copied, I was told, to 3 separate humanitarian research institutions. A report documenting the physical condition of 11 children after 3 days of desert exposure, the testimonies of multiple witnesses regarding the behavior of an unidentified large male lion in the Diffa corridor, and the convergence of those testimonies across individuals who had no prior contact with each other. She told me the day before I was transferred to the main camp at Diffa town. I filed this report because the evidence requires documentation, whatever the explanation, and I have my own view of the explanation. The evidence is real. The physical findings are real. The testimonies are real. Science does not get to ignore inconvenient data, neither do I. She paused. And personally, she said more quietly, I have been thinking about John 14:6. Since you told me about the page in your pocket, I reached into my shirt. I took out the folded page. Soft as cloth now, the fold lines nearly transparent, held together more by intention than by integrity at this point. I put it in her hand. She looked at it for a long time. Keep it, I said. I know it by heart now. She folded it carefully. She put it in her breast pocket, the same place I had kept it, against her sternum, over her heart. She did not say anything else. She didn't need to. I want to speak to you now, directly, not as a storyteller, as a witness. If you are Muslim, I was you. I know the fear of saying this name. I know what it costs in your community, your family, your sense of self and belonging and eternal safety to even consider what I'm telling you. I am not asking you to abandon your sincerity. I am asking you to point your sincerity at the one who sent a lion into a Nigerian ravine for 11 children and one broken man. Sincerity is enough, he will answer. He answered me with nothing, no credentials, no qualifications, no correct doctrine. Just a torn page and an honest prayer in the dark. He will answer you. If you are a skeptic, Dr. Diallo was you. 12 years in the field, evidence-based, rigorously trained, and she accumulated too much data to maintain her position. I am not asking you to abandon your rigor. I am asking you to apply it honestly to what you just heard. 11 children, 3 days, physical condition medically inconsistent with exposure. Multiple independent witnesses with no prior contact giving convergent testimony. 6 former militia fighters who walked away from a warlord's unit because of what they witnessed. A 7-year-old boy who spoke for the first time in 4 days to deliver a message he had no way of knowing. Rigorously, what is the most parsimonious explanation for all of that simultaneously? If you are a Christian who has stopped believing in miracles, I am not angry at you. I understand how that happens, how the gap between the Bible you read on Sunday and the Monday you live in can become so wide that miracles start to feel like another country, a country you used to have citizenship in but whose passport expired. I am here to tell you, the passport hasn't expired, the country hasn't moved. The God who sent Daniel's lion sent mine, the same God, the same authority, the same love. The miracles did not end. Our expectation of them did. If you are in your own ravine right now, whatever form it takes, whatever is circling you in the dark, whatever militia is tracking you, whatever version of Commander Yusuf has your name on his list, I need you to hear what Musa said to me, 12 years old, hand on my shoulder, clear as water. Brother Dawit, we should pray to Yesu. That's the instruction. That's all of it. Pray to Yesu. I want to tell you where I am now. Not because my current circumstances are impressive. They are not. I live in a settlement camp in the Diffa region. My home is a structure that took 3 days to build from mud brick and salvaged timber and a piece of corrugated iron that lets the rain in when the wind comes from the north. I own the clothes I am wearing. A Bible that Father Jerome gave me, real, complete, with all 66 books, the first Bible I have ever owned in my life, and a photograph of my mother that a camp volunteer printed from a scanned image someone found on a humanitarian database. That photograph is pinned to the wall above where I sleep. Every morning when I open my eyes, the first thing I see is her face, smiling, the real smile. I have nothing. And I have everything. Let me tell you what everything looks like on an ordinary Tuesday in a Diffa refugee settlement, because I think you need to understand what it means to live after a miracle. People imagine that a miracle ends the story, that the lion walks away and the credits roll and the survivor goes on to live a comfortable, supernaturally insulated life where problems bounce off him like bullets off the invisible shield he now apparently carries. That is not what happens. What happens is, the Monday after the miracle, you still wake up in a tent. You still have no money. The situation that created the crisis is still there. Commander Yusuf is still operating in the Difa corridor, his list presumably updated with my name underlined. The geopolitical forces that turned my region into a killing field are still grinding. The grief for my mother, my father, for Pastor Elias and Sister Agnes, and every person the violence has taken, that grief did not evaporate when the lion bowed its head. What changed is who I face all of it with. That is the whole difference. That is the miracle that outlasted the lion, the presence, the specific, daily, practical presence of Jesus in the ordinary mechanics of survival, the way provision appears, not always dramatically, not always supernaturally, but consistently, reliably, with the specific quality of intention behind it that distinguishes provision from coincidence. The morning the camp food distribution ran out and a UN truck arrived 3 hours early with an unscheduled delivery, and the driver couldn't explain why he'd taken that route. The evening a visiting church group from Niamey brought medicines, and the specific medicine they brought was exactly what the baby, my baby, I call her mine now, I have called her mine since the ravine, needed for the respiratory infection she had developed the night I was running a fever, and Musa sat with me and read from the Gospel of John, read it from memory, the whole thing in the dark, because Pastor Elias had made him memorize it, and now, on this night, it was medicine, consistent, intentional, personal, not the distant procedural provision of a God managing logistics from altitude, the close, warm, noticing provision of a father who knows which tent you're in and what you need and has already made arrangements. That is what I live in now, every single day. I want to tell you about Musa. Musa is 13 now. He has been in the camp school for 8 months, and his teacher, a Nigerian woman named Madame Fatima, who teaches 40 children in a tent with 2 broken chairs and more patience than any human being I have ever met, told me last month that Musa reads at the level of a 17-year-old, that he finishes every assignment before the other children have started, that when he is done, he helps the slower students without being asked, that he never boasts about his ability and never loses patience with a classmate who is struggling. That boy, Madame Fatima told me, is going to do something significant with his life. I told her he already has. She didn't know about the ravine. I told her. She sat very still for a long time after I finished. Then she said, he is going to be a pastor. I think she is right. Musa leads the children's prayer group now. 11 children initially, the same 11 from the ravine, and now 23 more who have joined from the wider camp. He prays with the same unself-conscious directness he has always had, the same clean, uncomplicated faith that treats Jesus like a present conversation partner rather than a historical figure. He prays for specific things and expects specific answers. He documents the answers in a small notebook Father Jerome gave him. The notebook is almost full. And the baby, I need to tell you about the baby. She is walking now. 18 months in the ravine, 18 months later. Walking, running actually, with the specific joyful recklessness of a toddler who has not yet learned that the world contains edges. She has a name. Her mother named her, I learned eventually, from a camp worker who had known the family. Her name is Rahama. In Hausa, it means mercy. Mercy, the child whose mother was taken. The child I carried through the desert, the child who patted the Bible page against my chest with her small, flat hand. The child who was supposed to be in critical condition and wasn't. The child who was called Mercy. I look at her running between the tents and I think, of course that is her name. What else would you call the child who God sent into the arms of a man who needed to learn what mercy felt like from the inside? She calls me Baba. I did not teach her to call me that. She decided it herself, the way children decide things, absolutely, without consultation, as settled fact. I heard it the first time, and I had to go around the back of the tent and stand there for a few minutes doing the weeping thing again. I do a lot of weeping. I have made my peace with it. I think it is simply what happens when a human heart that was closed for a long time starts opening. The pressure differential produces tears the way a dam produces water when you finally lift the gate. I am not ashamed of it. My mother would have liked Rahama very much. The mission. Let me tell you about the mission, because it did not start as a mission. It started as an accident, or what I thought was an accident, before I understood that nothing in this story has been an accident. 3 weeks after we arrived in the camp, Father Jerome asked me to share my testimony at the camp's Sunday gathering, not a church service. The camp is predominantly Muslim, which Father Jerome respects with the practical wisdom of a man who has been doing ecumenical ministry in conflict zones for 30 years. Just a gathering, an open invitation. Anyone who wanted to come. 40 people came. I stood up in front of 40 people and I told them what I just told you. The ravine, the lion, the water, the paw print in the sand. When I finished, the gathering was silent for a long time. Then a woman in the third row, a Kanuri woman, Muslim, hijab, the kind of face that has been weathered by years of carrying more than it should have to carry, raised her hand and said, "Can I ask Yesu for something? Right now? Like you did in the ravine?" I said, "Yes, he is here right now. You can ask him for anything." She bowed her head and she prayed, right there. In the middle of a UN refugee camp in the Difa corridor, a Muslim woman in a hijab bowed her head and talked to Jesus for the first time in her life. Not with the right words, not with theological precision, with the same broken, honest, "this is all I have" directness that I had used in the ravine. When she lifted her head, her face was wet. She said, "He answered. I felt him answer, right now while I was still talking." 17 more people prayed that day. I know you are counting. 17, the same number. The number Dr. Diallo's UN report will record in its witness section. The same number. I noticed it too. I do not think it is coincidence. I think it is a signature. I think God has a sense of continuity in his work that we mostly miss because we are not paying attention. 40 people came to that first gathering. The next Sunday, 80 came. The Sunday after that, the gathering had to move outside because there was no tent large enough. I have told this story. The lion, the ravine, Musa and Rahama and Abdul and Dr. Diallo and Johanna's message about my mother. I have told it at this point more times than I can count. In the camp, in the surrounding settlements, to visiting journalists who came with cameras and left with more than they expected, to a delegation of UN officials who asked very carefully and professionally whether I would be willing to be interviewed for a humanitarian research project on religious experience in conflict-affected populations. I said yes to all of them because I made a promise in a desert ravine with my face in the red sand. Whatever is left of my life, it is yours. All of it. Take it. Use it. He has taken me at my word. Every time I tell this story, people meet Jesus. Not every single person, not through manipulation or pressure or the manufactured emotional environment of a revival meeting. Just through the story, through the plain, undecorated, this is what happened fact of it. Because the story itself carries something. Because truth, when it is actually true, has a weight to it that the human soul recognizes even before the mind has finished processing the words. People meet Jesus through this story, and that is why I am telling it to you right now. I want to speak to you now with everything I have. Not as a storyteller, not as a former Muslim from Borno State, not as a refugee, not as the man with the lion testimony that the UN is writing reports about, as a witness. A witness is someone who saw something real and is legally, morally, humanly obligated to tell the truth about what they saw. I am a witness, and this is my testimony, and you are the reason I am giving it. You. The person watching this right now, wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever brought you to this video, algorithm, curiosity, desperation, boredom, The specific 2 a.m. quality of searching for something without knowing what you're searching for. You are why I'm still talking. To my Muslim brothers and sisters, I know your world. I lived in it for 23 years and I loved it. The structure of the 5 prayers, the beauty of the Quran's Arabic, the community of Ramadan, the genuine desire to be close to God that Islam cultivates in sincere believers. I am not here to attack what you love. I am here to tell you that everything sincere in you, every genuine hunger for God, every honest prayer, every real desire to be known by the Creator, that hunger is correct. You are right to want that. You are right that there is a God who is worth knowing personally, and I am here to tell you, as someone who tried every door first, that the door that opened was Yeshua. Not because I was theologically sophisticated enough to choose him, because I was desperate enough to call on him, because in a ravine with nothing left, I tried the one name I had been afraid to try, and he came. I know what it costs you to consider this. I know the community cost, the family cost. In some of your contexts, I know the physical cost. I am not minimizing that. I am telling you that what you find on the other side of that cost is worth everything it asks of you. I am living proof. You do not need the right words. You do not need to understand the Trinity or work out the theological mechanics of the incarnation before you are allowed to call on him. You just need to be honest. You just need to say, Yeshua, I don't fully understand you, but I want to know if you're real. Show me. I'm asking. He will show you. Not because you deserve it, neither did I, because he is that kind of God. To my atheist and skeptic brothers and sisters, I respect your commitment to evidence. I share it, not theoretically, but practically, as a man who has spent his entire adult life in situations where wishful thinking gets people killed and only reality can be trusted. I am not asking you to abandon your commitment to evidence. I am asking you to apply it to what you just heard without preemptively deciding what the conclusion must be. You have Dr. Amara Diallo, 12 years of field medicine, former atheist evidence-based practitioner, documenting physical findings she cannot medically explain. You have 6 independent witness accounts from people with no prior contact producing convergent testimony. You have the physical condition of 11 children inconsistent with 3 days of desert exposure. You have a 7-year-old boy delivering specific, accurate information he had no natural means of possessing. I am not asking you to call it a miracle if that word is too loaded. I am asking you to do what Dr. Diallo did, to refuse to ignore inconvenient data, to follow the evidence wherever it goes, even if it goes somewhere your current framework doesn't have a category for, because the evidence goes somewhere, and where it goes, he is there. To my brothers and sisters who already know Jesus, I need to say something to you that may be uncomfortable, and I am going to say it anyway because I believe it is true, and I believe you need to hear it from someone who found Jesus in a ravine rather than in a comfortable Sunday service. Stop living like the miracles ended. I see it, even from here, even in a refugee settlement in the Difa corridor. I see it in the way the testimonies that reach us from the comfortable Christian world sound, the careful, hedged, theologically responsible way of talking about God that has all the right words and none of the fire, the way prayer has become a ritual rather than a conversation, the way faith has become a position rather than a relationship, the way the Bible is read as history rather than as a live document from a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever and means it. The God who sent Daniel's lion is my God. The God who opened the Red Sea is my God. The God who walked out of the tomb on the 3rd morning is my God, and he has not retired. He has not changed his methods. He has not decided that the age of the miraculous was a limited time offer that expired with the last apostle. He is still moving. He moved in a ravine in the Difa corridor in 2023. He is moving right now. Ask him to move in your life, not cautiously, not with the 1 foot in and 1 foot out hedging of someone who has been disappointed before and is managing their expectations. Ask him fully, expect him fully, treat him like the lion sending, water providing, dead raising, militia rooting God that he actually is, rather than the polite background presence that your comfortable Christianity has sometimes reduced him to. He is bigger than your biggest problem, and he is closer than your closest fear. To everyone, I want to pray with you right now, not a performance prayer, not the kind designed to sound moving, the same kind I prayed in the ravine, broken, honest, direct, with absolutely nothing to recommend it except sincerity. If you want to pray this with me, if something in you has been stirred by this story, if something in you recognizes the truth of it the way your body recognizes water when you are thirsty, then say these words out loud if you can, under your breath if you must, in your heart if that's all you have. Yeshua, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I'm not sure I have the right words or the right understanding or the right anything, but I am here and I am asking if you are real. And I am beginning to believe you are, then I need you to be real for me, not for someone else's ravine, for mine. I don't have a lion in my story, but I have whatever you are facing right now. Say it out loud. He already knows, but say it anyway. And I need you. I want to know you the way Dawit knows you, the way Musa knows you, the way the woman in the 3rd row knew you the moment she asked, "Come into my life, be my Lord, I am yours." If you prayed that, if those words just left your mouth or your heart with any degree of sincerity at all, welcome. Welcome to the family. Welcome to the most extraordinary, most difficult, most alive thing you will ever do with your life. Welcome to the story that doesn't end when the lion walks away. The story that is just beginning. You just became a miracle. Not metaphorically. In the same real, physical, documented, Dr. Amara Diallo put it in a report way that everything in this testimony is real. You just became a miracle, a human being made new, a name written in a book, a lost sheep found. I want to close with something Musa said to me last week. We were sitting outside after the evening prayer gathering, Musa and me and Rahama, who was asleep against my shoulder, her small warm weight the specific ballast of a child who trusts you completely, watching the Sahel stars come out one by one, the same stars I watched from the ravine, the same sky, the same vast, ancient, overwhelmingly inhabited darkness above us. Musa was quiet for a long time. Then he said, not dramatically, not with the performance of a boy who knows he is saying something profound, but just conversationally, the way he says everything. "Brother Dawit, do you think the lion is still out there somewhere?" I thought about it. I thought about the paw print in the red sand, the single impression, the evidence of a presence that had touched the ground once and then returned to wherever it came from. "I think," I said carefully, "that it is exactly where God needs it to be." Musa nodded. He considered this. "Good," he said, "because there are a lot of ravines." He picked up his notebook, the almost full one, the one documenting every answered prayer, and he opened it to a new page, and he began to write. "There are a lot of ravines. Yours is one of them, and the Lion of Judah, the one who holds the title, who earned it, who wore flesh and walked dusty roads and wept over dead friends and hung on a cross and walked out of a tomb and sends lions into desert ravines for broken men with torn Bible pages pressed against their chests. That lion knows exactly where your ravine is. He has already left. He is already on his way. Call his name, Yeshua. just that, just his name, he will come.